we have consistently throughout history seen innovation allow human beings to accomplish more than what we could accomplish before.
Hmm.
And every time there's an innovation, it is a threat, quote unquote, to those human beings who are filling in the gaps of our inefficiencies.
This business podcast, the Two Business Guys Mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. So, Rob, I got to tell you this, man. I had to hunt somebody down to give them my money. It's incredible the level of customer service in business. I mean, hunt them down, right? It was an investment platform. Maybe I should say it. I don't know if I want to put it out there because I did actually hunt them down. But I'm thinking about that, Robert. I'm going, how hard is it for people to do business with your business? We've talked a little bit about this before, but
Yeah.
we got to make it now with the chat GPTs and everything and the answer engines, everything being easy. You've got to make it almost stupid easy to just do business with you. But we'll get into that in a
Yeah.
minute, man. We'll talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that. What else is going on in the world?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that there's some interesting things that's happening that I'm really interested in talking about. Just as far as, we're back into this space where what can you say, what can't you say, what's going to get you fired, what's not going to get you fired, what's the
Canceled.
acceptable response, right, cancel culture and all the rest of that. So I think, there's a couple stories that are really interesting that we could talk about with regarding that as well.
Yeah, it is business now. Everybody has gotten really, really weird. I was literally doing some research the other day, and I'm finding that people are giving money back. They're shrinking their funds. I was looking at that. So now we get on one hand, not too long ago, we get a whole bank that goes down, right? We talked a little bit about that. It goes down, and now people have to get their money out, but the investors in that bank and the founders and stuff, they're out. So if you invested in the bank, says, hey, look, I'm not going to just put money in the bank, I'll invest in the bank. Well, your money's gone.
Sorry for you.
The depositors, yeah. I mean, and we think about what you might have to do going forward. If you're going to be insured up to a certain amount,
Hmm.
the likelihood of you taking, getting some VC money and then taking it and saying, well, I'll put 250 here, 250 there, 250, that's unlikely, right? So
It's unwieldy.
and of course what happens, the stock market does its thing. It's going up and down. People are buying
Yeah.
gold again. I mean, finding places, the NFT space went back up. This is the era we're in.
Mm.
So my question is, how does one not just lose their mind and get absolutely overwhelmed with the rapid pace of change? Oh, and I'm not even talking about the deep fakes and the scams out there now. Being able to take AI, a piece of your voice. Have you heard about this one? Being able to take a piece of your voice and create whole sentences and paragraphs, and their scammers are sending it to your loved ones saying stuff like, I'm in trouble. I don't have time to explain. Send me money.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is that era, and I think it's one of those interesting things because you could really quickly catastrophize it. I feel like the one thing that a lot of people don't understand or don't pay attention to when there's like these mass panics and everything, you got to be a student of history. I remember I was reading Robert Kiyosaki, um, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he was talking about how you have to understand the cycles and the way that things have happened. And there's boom bust cycles in economies going back to the 1600s, and you can even go back and look at Rome and look at other things where you see these boom bust cycles in economies. And if you don't understand that as part of the system, then when you see it happening, then it kind of it'll scare you. It'll make you feel like, oh my God, we'll never come back from this. Like it's the end of the world. It's like, calm down. We've seen the end of the world
Pump the
a
brakes.
number of times, right? And that's not to minimize how difficult it is to deal with this stuff. That's not to say that it's not a problem, but it is to say that you can learn a lot from how people have gotten through other situations that are similar to the one that you're dealing with, right? And in this situation, right, you got the deep fakes, you got the AI, you got all this type of stuff. People are talking about people are going to lose jobs. And this, I think one number I heard was like 75 million jobs
Yeah, and I actually heard that that number
in
is
the
now
next
up
10 or 15 years
less
that
than that.
could be lost to generative AI, to AI stuff. But the
Yeah,
problem again is
how many
like,
jobs will be
do you all
created?
not remember? Do you all not remember the story of John Henry? Like in American history, just in the late 1800s, right? The story of John Henry, for those of you all that don't know, John Henry was a former slave who was uh, out in the frontier, and he was part of the groups that were building railroads, and he would drive nails, and he could do the work of 10 men, basically. He was the best at driving nails and breaking through rock and doing all these different types of things they needed to do to build the railroad. And the history of that story is that, they created a machine that could do 10 times what John Henry could do, right? And, depending on the fable that you listen to, there's one story where John Henry goes and he works as hard as he can and he actually beats the machine, but then he dies right after he beats the machine because his heart explodes, right?
Well, that's no good.
Right. And so the machine just cooled down and then they put it back up and they kept going, right? Um, and the other stories that, the machine beat him, but he gave a valiant effort, all these different types of things. But the whole point of it is we have consistently throughout history seen innovation allow human beings to accomplish more than what we could accomplish before.
Hmm.
And every time there's an innovation, it is a threat, quote unquote, to those human beings who are filling in the gaps of our inefficiencies. So if I have a 10-man ditch digging crew that is working and digging ditches because I have the ability to sell ditch digging to people who need ditches, and I can get that ditch digging done with those 10 men have jobs. However, those 10 men also require me to pay for insurance. They also require me to pay for workman's comp.
They're
They also
expensive.
require me to pay for health insurance, life insurance, right? All types of different things, taxes. Now, innovation happens and the backhoe is invented. The backhoe requires one man and gasoline and insurance and all the rest of that type of stuff. But the
Yep.
level of insurance that I need on that backhoe and that one man, the liability insurance, is, let's say, half of the cost of what I need those 10 men for. Oh, and by the way, that backhoe doesn't call in sick. That
Shows up
backhoe
every
doesn't
day.
have family issues. That backhoe doesn't have any of the rest of that type of stuff. Sometimes the backhoe needs maintenance, which is an extra cost. When you do the cost of the 10 men versus the backhoe wins because it's 40% more effective, right? It's not a ton, but it's 40% more effective. Right? Let's say 40%. That means that there's 40% more money in the business to hire other people to fill other gaps. There's 40% more money in the business for me to take and send my children to do what I want my children to do, because that's the reason I started a business. There's 40% more income to do whatever there is. But here's the one thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Also, that backhoe conductor, that backhoe driver makes twice as much as the ditch digger.
So now we got a specialist.
And we've created a better job. So that backhoe driver takes better care of his family than that ditch digger is able to take care of his family. That backhoe driver takes better care of his body than that ditch digger is able to take care of his body. And those 10 ditch diggers are able to take care of their bodies. But there's 9 ditch diggers that are technically out of work temporarily. But those 9 ditch diggers are very knowledgeable about ditch digging. If they go and get certified in driving a backhoe, they can probably command top dollar in the ditch digging industry with the knowledge that they have. The
Yep.
question is, do they want to innovate for themselves? Do they have that mindset, or are they constantly expecting the entrepreneur, the job creator, to innovate for them.
Yeah.
And
And
there's so many times where I think that's the big thing. People feel like you're supposed to create a job for me and you're supposed to keep me employed, right?
wow.
And that's where I think a lot of people are getting stuck because if you have the
And
mindset of I'm responsible for me,
yeah, and there are opportunity there too, y'all. I mean, come on. We've got to be the businesses. We've got to be, I think, the businesses that are out there on the landscape, checking things out and seeing what's possible. Now, the great thing is just how I've created the stuff that I do. I get excited. I got overwhelmed for maybe 5 minutes because I had just spun up a new website and something new came out and it was like, ooh, that's new. Right. And I was like, stay focused. But then we have to ask, stay focused on what? Because once you focus on that, the target moves. And then you have another just as good of a focus point, a target, right? So I'm really curious in the work that you're doing with leaders as you're going out there, they've got to be overwhelmed with the rapid changes. Now, keep in mind, leaders like to make these 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans.
that's the whole
I'm
deal.
just curious, how do you do that? Right? Because these plans are
Right.
going to be involved, especially if they're of a financial nature. They're going to
Yeah.
say, well, we assume that prices are going to stay the same. We assume that
Mm,
my on the
this,
ground business wheatgrass went
hmm.
up,
Yeah.
right? We didn't had no idea that wheatgrass was going to go up by as much as it did,
Hmm.
right? This is my juice business.
Yep.
And it's like this is crazy. So now what do I got to do? I got to refigure the profitability of a particular location based on the fact that all of our prices on the goods are up, that
Hmm.
we have to, now increase the pay of our employees, all that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
How do you now have conversations with leaders, man, that they've got long term? Hey, we think this is going to cost this. What do you mean energy prices just double?
Well, the big thing about it, and it's a good question because it is an issue that leaders have to deal with all the time, right? Because one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize that leaders are generally thinking and living in the future. I always tell my team, right? I live in the future. I come back to the present to visit y'all every once in a while, right? Like my mind is always thinking about what's next, what's coming, what's there, how do these things connect, et cetera. And so you bring up a good point. It is difficult to predict the future, but it's not as difficult to plan for the future. And what do I mean by that?
Ooh, that's good.
The future is a range of possibilities. It's not just one thing that's going to happen. The people that generally get messed up by the future is when you just plan for one thing. Because if you just plan for one thing, you lose your flexibility, you lose your adaptability. But if you're constantly planning for a number of things, it doesn't have to be infinite, right? You can have 3 or 4 scenarios that could possibly happen. And when you give yourself that type of a range and you make sure you're prepared for this scenario and this scenario and this scenario and this scenario, then what it does is it takes you through the process of thinking about the different scenarios and looking at the different options so that you've already done that work. So that then when the thing happens,
Uh-huh.
you've already got a head start on it because you've already been down that pathway before, right? Ray Dalio talked about this in his book, Principles, right? He was like, any financial investor worth their salt is not going to tell you that one category of assets is where you need to have your money.
Uh-huh.
Because if you know anything about the history of markets, every category of assets has gone down at some point in time in history. What you need to understand is how the assets move and in what directions they move relative to each other so that you can have a plan that no matter what's happening, your money is going to what's going up.
That's kind of like the mutual fund approach versus the single stock approach, right?
Exactly,
I
right?
think the
It's
Wall Street Trapper
diversification.
talks a lot about that, right? Wall Street
Hmm.
Trapper, if you all don't know, is a brother that just gets after it, right? And talks a
Yeah,
lot about buy the whole market,
yeah,
right? He talks a lot of safety, but it's really a matter of consistency and buying the whole market, right? That
right.
8% over time is
That's
good
the key because what you have to
versus
know is you're playing the long game, right? Like the whole thing, and this is what a lot of people struggle with. Again, the game is not predict, like even in fighting, right? There's like UFC. There's UFC fight tonight. There's boxing matches tonight. There's a whole bunch of fighting tonight. The game is not predict when the person is going to hit me with the power shot
Mm-hmm.
because their whole job is to be unpredictable. The game is make sure I can survive the power shot whenever it comes.
No matter what I get hit with, I can survive.
No,
So
no
what's
matter
that
what I get
strategy?
hit with. So that strategy requires a different mindset. That strategy requires you to consider all of the things that can happen to you negatively and to determine which of those things you're willing to get up from and which of those things you're not. Which of those things you're willing to throw the towel in and which of those things you're like, nah, I can deal with this. And
Man,
so,
that's
perfect
good.
example, brick and mortar business, same thing you're talking about. I coach a business that runs a restaurant. So they do chicken wings and fries and all that type of stuff, right? Over the COVID period, they started their business, were doing great, right? Almost reached $500,000 in revenue. One location. Then
Not
price of
bad money.
chicken skyrocketed
Not bad money.
to over twice what it was, to almost twice of what it was before. It went from
Yep.
about 70, $80 a case to $150 a case, right? So that kills margins because generally in retail and in food spaces, for you, those of you all that are aware, you're generally looking at margins somewhere of 60 to 70% on just your food costs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
your variable margins, your gross margins on 6, 70%. And then you're looking at your net profit. If you can get anywhere above 30%, you're doing very good. Most restaurants are somewhere around 10%, right? And so when your food costs double, that means that your variable cost doubles, which means that
Oh,
now instead of making 70%, you're making 35%,
don't I
40%,
know it?
right? And so he was immediately, my client was struggling. Part of the reason why he was struggling is because he didn't know how the chicken was affecting him. He just knew that it was because he didn't have his numbers out. He didn't have everything done. So one of the first things that we did is we actually went in and we said, okay, where are you spending your money? Where are things going? How much are your fixed costs? How much are you paying your employees? How much are you paying this? And put it out on a spreadsheet so this is how much money I need to make every month before I can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then we looked at let's look at everything you sell because you know how it is a restaurant. There's a couple of major things, but you got a whole bunch of stuff on the on the menu. Some of the stuff don't make you any money. Some of the stuff makes you a ton of
Right.
money, but you're not advertising,
Correct.
right?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And it
Yep.
was the same thing. It was the same thing in his restaurant. So one of the things that we realized in his restaurant, there was two things. Number one, his fish sandwiches and fish, platter was making 3 to 1 what his wings platter was making.
Mm.
But he wasn't really pubbing or anything. It was just a nice thing. It was like, how about we do fish Fridays, right? And so he started doing fish Fridays, and you start making that extra revenue while you're trying to figure out what to do, right? So even though he wasn't able to change chicken prices, he was still paying through the roof for chicken prices. He found money in other places,
See,
right?
that's the tip. That's the
Right.
tip.
So that's the first thing. Where can you find other opportunity? Where can you innovate? Where can you market? Where can you do something different? But the second thing is you're not stuck with the situation that you have just because that's the situation that's right now. One of the things that is so interesting to me is when people, right? And I went and got certified as a NLP practitioner, clinical hypnotherapist, went through did a lot of training working on the mind and working on how we move ourselves and put ourselves into society in our world. How do we see things? And one of the things that they talked about a lot in the training was, are you at effect in your life or are you at cause? And what that means is,
Mm.
does life happen to you or do you happen to life and does life happen for you because of what you do, right? So something simple when you look at that is a lot of people, when the price of a good goes up, when the price of gas goes up, when the price of anything goes up, they're like, oh man, prices are going up, right? You remember this back in New York, they
Mm-hmm.
were like, the rent is
Mm-hmm.
too damn high, right? Like just
Mm-hmm.
all those types of statements that are, I'm angry at what's out in the marketplace. It's like you're entitled to have that opinion. You're entitled to have that feeling. But the question I always ask is, and so what are you going to do about it?
Right. Right. Because
Right?
what's happening is not going to change. The fact that
It,
chat
it
GPTs and all
may
that is
it may
here, it's not going
change,
to
it may
change.
not change, but whether it changes or not is not up to you unless you're going to go and hang out in those rooms and make it change. But what can you do? How can you be at cause in your life? And what they call this a success formula, right? When you're at cause for more things in your life than you are at effect, you are more successful. And so what my client did, we looked at what are some ways that you could reduce your chicken costs? Well, one of the things that he realized he had one supplier. So then he started calling around and looking for other suppliers. And he
Yep.
started seeing that there was actually a market, that his supplier had doubled, but there were other people that were, right? If his supplier was at 149, there was people that were 120, 130. He even was able to get, one of the things he was able to do was find a distributor, a wholesale distributor, where if he went and got the chicken, it was only 40 minutes away. If he went and
Mm-hmm.
got the
Mm-hmm.
chicken, he could get it for $100 a case. So just in calling around, he was able to reduce his costs by
Got to put in a
30%,
little work, a little extra.
right? But right,
That
and you know
30% brings money back, though.
right, that's
Okay,
a
I
triple
got it.
week. But then he also figured out that he was buying boneless wings from the supplier, and that his margins were, so-so. But he could make boneless wings just because he could get the breasts and then cut them up himself and make the boneless wings, and he could increase his profitability by 100% on those boneless wings by making it in house. Right. So when he started looking at innovations, looking at ways, and what that allowed him to do was he found margins again in the business,
Mm.
even with the prices being what they were, even with the market being what it was, even with everything going the way that it was, he was able to find where he could innovate and he could make his business thrive, even if the market wasn't allowing his business to thrive the way that it used to thrive.
Yeah. See, and that's what's exciting about what you just said there is finding a new margin, right? I was taking some notes, y'all. So if you're listening to this, if you like, of course, if you like what you're hearing, put some words in the comment section, subscribe to the channel. And one of the more important things, send this to somebody. Just send it out and says, hey, listen, you got to listen to these dudes. They're sometimes they're full of canal water and other times they're just right on. And this might be one of those times. So how do you find your margins? Right? As the notes that I put down, everyone, it really goes down to, what's your next business threat? How do you find the margins? These are things that I'm kind of, as we talk about these things, as we mastermind on this stuff, we're asking ourselves for our personal businesses, and then how we then go out and help others, and maybe even you at sometimes. We listen to these conversations from what we pull from what's happening. And then we start strategizing. We start asking questions of it and saying, okay, here's a way maybe you can find some margin. And then in our personal work, can we find a margin by maybe utilizing a technology, a tool? Maybe it's a chat GPT. Maybe it's some other tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also, is it something that we could do to not be the effect of the business, but causing the business to do a thing? Right? The effects of society, the effects of what's happening to your margins, but then how can you cause a higher profit margin?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No,
Can we be
I
that?
like it. Yeah, and I got a question for you. As you're looking at this, especially in the marketing industry, because like you're a marketing guru, right? And so that's your world. And there's a lot of jobs that ChatGPT is kind of gobbling up in that industry,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not affecting you because you're one of those that's at cause,
I
right? So
I'm a
so
surfer and it's a tsunami and I'm thrilled
yeah, exactly,
because
right.
I
So
think I can
so
surf that thing.
So talk to some of those aspiring, ad agency or marketing agency owners, some of those copywriters, people that are out there that are trying to figure out what they're going to do. What are some ideas that you have for them on how you
Yeah.
can use this, how you can surf this tsunami?
Okay, so as I look at it, as opposed to looking from the lens of I just work here and this thing is now a threat to me, what if we looked at it from the standpoint of, oh, and because I work here, this thing can help us be more productive in a whole different way, right? So I look at it again, when you see something coming, you can either look at it, like you said, Rob, you can either be the cause or the effect, right? Or have this thing be, how are you going to look at it? So I'm asking myself and talking to a lot of people about how can we ride this wave that's happening, right? We see a lot of people's attention is on the productivity that comes from it. But can we go out there and show them how? We can open up whole new lanes of business that way from a marketing perspective. If we're marketers worth our salt, then we say, hey, let me show you how you can make more money. So what I did, for example, is I went and got a couple more domains, and I am spinning up different websites that then speak specifically to how to become more productive and make more money from what's coming. So that's the if that's the surfer move, that's the judo move, and saying, instead of saying, there's no way that the person's 300 pounds. I'm 150 all wet. I cannot block that punch. But because of the power that's coming, if I learn a couple of jujitsu moves, maybe I can flip them. Right? So can you flip what's happening? And this is the conversation I'm having with people now. It's like, okay, let's flip it. Let's get the right software that helps us reduce out costs. If you got a whole bunch of people, we use the right software. Then we say, how can I now go out there and have a narrative conversation with people that don't know a lot about it? So you're 1 to 2, 3 to 4 steps ahead, but also that may have their head in the sand saying, I don't want this yet another new thing to affect me. You go out there and show them the how. Now, what I've been able to do is change up my own personal model. Instead of the, hey, you do it yourself model, I've been doing a done with you model, the DWY model, right? Okay, I'm going to do this with you. Now, I've been bringing the software with me, saying, nope, don't use that, use this.
So
Because from
something to
my
pay
perspective, I
attention.
can do something and
Yeah.
show them and then say, use this. It's going to save you on cost. It's going to be smarter because it's all in one, whatever it is. And then just teach them how and even show them an example. I'll even do the example for them.
Now I want to make sure that everybody caught the nuggets that you just dropped, because you just dropped a couple of them and you slid one in surreptitiously. In his clandestine matter, like he just a spy or whatever. Y'all ain't catch that. You don't have to watch it like 2 or 3 times. What he said was, number one, if you see that there are things coming, look at how they can help you to be more productive.
Yeah,
And then similarly, look at how you can teach other people, right? Take your knowledge and teach other people how to do what you do, right? Because that's always a market that's out there. Because there's always people. If
exactly.
you're here, there's always people here trying to get here, and you can be one of the people that helps them try to get here, right? But the other thing that Randy just did that I don't know if y'all picked up was, he said you can get them to use particular softwares that you use. And the thing that wasn't embedded in there, but I'm gonna go ahead and illuminate it for everybody, is when Randy's doing that, he's an affiliate with the
Yes, of
softwares that
course,
he's
of
getting
course.
people to use.
Yes,
So he's allowing himself to make money off of the stuff that he uses already, so that he's not just recommending stuff for free,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And it's your
And
marketplace,
that's
right?
it.
So if you see a whole bunch of competitive pressure coming into your marketplace, then you're basically asking yourself, how can I help my marketplace? Not how can I fight the competition? Because that's
Exactly.
you won't be able to. And that leads us into another conversation about the different chat GPTs and the different generative AIs that are coming online, and how it's going to be a proliferation of this, and how there was one company, Rob, that I was almost disappointed until I kind of got an idea what they're doing. And that was Google. Here, they've had this technology for years. They have been working on it longer than anybody, but they got beat on the start, right? So somebody came out and says, "Hey, we have ChatGPT." And then they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're behind the 8 ball. We started this. We've been working on this for 10 years." And then they just came out with their product, right? We're talking about Google Bard. So Google Bard comes out with the product, and people are out there going, "This is kind of boring." And they did that on purpose,
Hmm.
right? They're not trying to be a flash in the pan. And you said it
Hmm.
earlier. They're thinking of the long game,
Exactly.
right? Now you can go to Bing and then you can go to Microsoft Bing. They got theirs. I like it. I've used it. I actually thought that I says, okay, you know, when they at first came out, I thought, you know what, they're kind of behind the eight ball on OpenAI and their Chat GPT. But then they decided to connect with Chat GPT or OpenAI and create all kinds of stuff. And I was like, I see what they did. They just want to incorporate it in how they do what they do. So now they're able to go to the internet. Because if you look at some of these, conversational AIs, they have subsets of information, but it goes back only to like 2021,
21. Yeah.
right? But yet now this other one is saying, no, we'll go to the internet and we'll help you out. So you may find yourself using both, right? You see that? That's the surf the wave. That's the judo move. Instead of saying, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, my model is dead. No, you go, I may have to use multiple ones to get an end result. And if I can go fast enough, now I'm several steps ahead. And that's what I've been talking to businesses about, right? It's like, hey, listen, you'll in one sense use this internet information to get your overall general idea. Then you'll take, oh wow, here's an idea, you'll maybe put that in Chat GPT now, and then you'll say, okay, expand on this. In other words, doing what you do best, expand on this.
Yep.
Right now you got one that's real time, you get information, but it doesn't do some of the other stuff without. And I looked at what they were doing, and they wanted to know, they wanted to jump into all your files and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what? Nah,
Ah,
I'm not going to go
good.
that far. Right. Because that's what they do. Right. It's like, hey, we want to take over
Exactly.
your whole operating system and all that. I was like, nah, bro,
Hmm.
you're not going to do it. Right. So, but then using one that's free, then one that maybe you pay for because GPT-4 just came out and it's like on fire. It'll do a whole bunch of stuff and it's going to grow and get better. And then if you have, remember how we talked about last week, I think we talked about ChatSpot, right? So ChatSpot's got their
Yep.
thing.
Yep. A
You can now
HubSpot. Yep.
have a connection to your CRM system. So you may have an opportunity until we get the all in one that does it all, right? And that's going to be coming soon, I'm sure. You may bolt on a couple of things, but from that, the productivity is not tenfold, but perhaps 100-fold. Then if
Exactly.
you say, oh, do I now have to do this? Not necessarily. I see a possibility for the person that's just one man or one woman bang to just go crazy productive. Or you apply the same principles of team. You apply the same
Right.
principles of utilizing and leveraging talent, and then you have them do it. You're just now still directing the work, but you now have a chance to go out there and find out what else is happening, and then come back to the team and says, what could we do with this new piece of information? How can we leverage this for our customers, our clients, and ourselves? That becomes, I
Right.
think, what is the possibility, man. And you will be swimming in information at first, and you'll kind of say to yourself, man, this is blowing my mind. And in the 5 minutes, I was like, man, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. It was in, what now do I fire? That's what it came from. It was like, well, I kind of don't need this anymore, but I've been using it. And you may say to yourself, do I let it go? And that can cause some conflict. If you let it go, you also let go. And this is what I was able to do. I looked at the cost. So I was able to wipe off thousands of dollars of use of one area to then
Mhm.
spin up one that I could do for a fraction of that.
There you go.
That's what I
That's the
noticed. I
whole
don't
idea.
need this, but these two together makes me go 10, 20, 30% more, or
And
30 times more.
here's the thing that everybody, I think, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, going back to the idea of what happens when change happens, what happens when all this
Right.
stuff, like with the catastrophe and everything else. What most people messed up about Darwin's quote and Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest, it's actually not survival of the fittest, quote unquote. It's survival of the most adaptable.
Mm.
All right. When you look at the theory of evolution, what it basically says is the the species, the entity that's able to adapt most to its environment will survive, will win.
Are you saying
And
they took Darwin out of context?
they took it. It's been yeah it's been miscommunicated, misconstrued because fittest, right? The whole idea of fit is adaptability. Whereas you could think of fit as strongest or fit as most sturdy or most steady. Actually, no, right? The most sturdy, the most steady. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, you know, you wanna sway like bamboo rather than be sturdy like an oak tree, because when the big storm comes, the oak tree
Mm,
breaks. The
mm.
bamboo can bend and perseveres and continues, right?
That's that
And
adaptability.
that's the adaptability. So the idea of fittest when you're talking about being fittest is to be the most adaptable. And what you were just talking about was, how do you maintain flexibility? How do you maintain the ability to continue to look? And
Correct.
what so many people get stuck in is they get stuck in the way that they do things. I just was doing a workshop with my client down in North Carolina the past couple of days, and that's one of the big things that we were talking about, right? So many people get into arguments because they're trying to talk about how to do something instead of what they want to get done, right? And if you get stuck on the how, you blind yourself to all of the much more efficient and effective ways to get done what you're asking to get done.
That is, if y'all didn't hear that and feel the power, like I just felt the power, asking how to do versus what needs to get done. Oh, I don't even know what to say. I'm almost speechless, y'all, because how to do this is the whole narrative conversation. It goes back to what's your next business threat. It's not the how, it's what needs to still get done. And how can we use that?
Exactly.
Right?
If you can always be focused on that, then you'll always be a step ahead of whatever's bothering you, because you're looking at results instead of inputs. There's a lot of people that will say stuff like, I work really hard. Like that's a good thing. Like,
Results versus
if you work
inputs.
really hard because it's necessary to work really hard to get what you want, great. But if you work really hard and it's not necessary to get what you want, it's like if somebody's like, man, I just worked really hard. It took me 10 hours to make this egg sandwich,
And
right?
I'd say why when you could
I'm
have
like,
went
bruh,
and
like, don't you know
got
that you can go
somebody
to
to
the
do it?
store 10 minutes and then you come back to the crib, and even if you a bad cook, you can have that egg sandwich done in about 30 minutes,
Right.
right?
That's so fun.
Shopping time included.
I was upset a couple of weeks ago because we went to a new restaurant and I didn't prefer that restaurant because I do the math in my head on stuff, right? And I'm going,
Mhm.
wait a minute. I know eggs are expensive, but $2 per egg. So so I'm sitting there going, yeah, this wasn't worth it. I won't be coming back here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And then to your point, Rob, if I had stayed home, I could have got a good egg, 33 cents, right? Depending on where you get them, 25 cents in other
Hmm.
cases. But then I got to cook it and I got to wash the dish. I got to
Yeah.
have a dish.
Right.
So, and then I don't get a chance to hang out with my loved one.
Right. Right.
So,
Everything that you talk about. And that's the benefit of there's multiple options. But here's the whole point of the analogy. For the person
what's
that's
the end
bragging
result?
about how hard they working, it's like, if it's necessary to work that hard to get what you're getting, okay, right? But working hard is not a badge of honor just in and of itself. It is not okay that, like even the idea, right? Because I think a lot of people, this comes from the conversation of kung fu, right, and martial arts, and this idea that you have to work at something, and Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, right, and all these type of things where you know that it requires a lot of work to be great, to be a master at something.
Mhm.
But the thing that most people don't understand is that the term kung fu actually in Chinese doesn't mean hard work. It means work over time, right? And the whole idea of being a master of kung fu, and you can be a master of kung fu in anything. Somebody that plays the piano very well has kung fu, right? Somebody that is a surgeon has kung fu. Somebody that is a expert marketer has kung fu. The whole idea is that they have put in a lot of time and work into mastering something. But the amount of time and work that's necessary to master things is a moving target depending on a lot of variables. LeBron had mastered basketball to the level that he was able to go to the NBA and be a superstar at 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some guys go all the way through college and they still not superstars. They just role players,
Mm. Point,
right? And
point
so
well
when you
taken.
look at it, right, and people be like, well, he should have went to college first. He needed more work, more development. I'm like, he can get really developed making a couple $1 million a year where he can spend all of his time focusing on development. And he ain't got to worry about his family. He ain't got to worry about nothing happening to his mama, nothing happening to anybody else. He's good. He doesn't require that extra hard work over here that everybody likes to say. And so as you're going through this, as you're looking at your lives, be open to easier ways of doing whatever it is that you're doing
That's it.
because it's about what you get done. How you do it is less important. It's not unimportant. You have to make sure that you're not doing it in a way it's not ecological. That's hurting other people. That's hurting yourself. It's hurting your family. It's hurting the environment. You got to make sure of that.
Yeah.
That's that's the do no harm metric. That doesn't mean
I,
it has to be the best way to do it. It just has to be the way that doesn't mess nothing up.
that right there to me brings it all back home. And whatever it is that your next business threat might be, I put here everything. Then turns into the question. Or what's your next new opportunity? Then turns into the question. Yeah, but what needs to get done? Not the new tool, not the next how, not the next who. Because we talk a lot about it's either going to be a what, something, or someone,
Exactly.
right? We need to ask the different question. What still needs to get done? And then as you're looking at your overall business, you're deciding on what is the best approach based on this new piece of information? Because that
Hmm.
still, the what still needs to get done. I
Hmm.
still need to make 30% profits because that pays everybody and continues to allow me to survive. I still
Hmm.
need to affect the marketplace and serve my clients in such a way, right? Let's stop worrying about the how and start getting to the what still needs to be done. And that's the show, everybody. I think to me, to me, when we can see what's happening out there, leverage it, and then get to the other end of this stuff, you'll never be out of business because you'll continue to roll with business. And
Yes.
that's the key.
Yeah.
Key to roll
Yeah.
with
How do you
business,
surf
everybody.
the wave?
That's it. That's it. All right. We'll talk next time.